Story 1. Former line cook in a number of restaurants, cooking my way through college. Owned a catering company at one point, still cook at events with a guerrilla supper club. I am the go-to cook for the extended family. Learned to cook out of necessity but have loved it my entire life. Still one of my favorite things in life. As Lydia Bastianich said, "You tell me the only other time you get to put something in someone else's body." Story 2. I'm not too bad. I tend to stick with what I know and don't do well when given a recipe to follow. For example, when it says to add a teaspoon of salt, I do that and it becomes the saltiest thing on earth. I don't trust recipes to be accurate, so I look at them and adjust accordingly. The lack of accuracy in recipes annoys me and puts me off. Story 3. I gained 20 pounds cooking for myself over the last 2 years because my portion control was poor, but my cooking is amazing, to me. Unfortunately, the only people who have tasted my cooking are my parents, as everyone I know refuses to eat anything I cook. Story 4. I cook for my family, but when I am alone, I get takeout out of sheer necessity because it tastes better. Story 5. I am good enough to reliably make my favorite dishes better than anything I would get at most restaurants. There are some restaurants I have been to where they do something really well, and it inspires me to make that dish better. My wife describes it as me ruining those dishes for her because once she has my version, she just thinks about how much better the food at the restaurant could be if they tailored everything to her tastes. Story 6. I am apparently better than I give myself credit for. I think I am okay, but I have had 3 different people tell me I made the best steak they ever had. Story 7. Let's just say I once tried to make scrambled eggs and somehow ended up with something that looked like abstract art. But hey, I make a mean microwave mug cake, and my boyfriend thinks my burned edges add character to everything. Story 8. I have kept my children alive solely by my cooking for the past 11 years. I am an okay cook. I just do not enjoy it. Story 9. I can follow a recipe and achieve the intended results. However, if left to my own devices without a recipe to guide me, I am not cooking much beyond roasted chicken or scrambled eggs. Story 10. It was not Gordon Ramsay's choice to cry when I was there. I made him cry. I succeeded where Marco failed. Story 11. I'm okay. I've lived alone for a long time and don't enjoy cooking for myself. I find portioning and waste management difficult, as trying not to waste anything can be a challenge. Spoilage can be an issue when I buy many ingredients for a recipe. I also find it difficult to vary my meals. I enjoy cooking with and for people, though. I describe myself as confused but willing. Story 12. I grew up in the restaurant business, put myself through college. I got out, thankfully, but picked up lots of cooking skills. Story 13. I am a really good cook. I can make some great food if I really try, but I am depressed and cannot handle the cleanup very well. Story 14. I do okay. Definitely not restaurant quality, but I cook for my family and they have not kicked me out of the kitchen yet. Story 15. I've recently become a fan of chilies and add them to almost every dish. Any spicy dish with sour cream is normally a winner in my books. I also managed to add this chili radish, which basically transforms a dish. I put pesto in every pasta dish and you are basically sorted. Regarding how long to cook something, be sure to note the pan temperature so you don't put it on full heat. Presto pesto. Story 16. I am quite a good plain cook, preparing everyday family-style meals for anywhere from 2 to 20 people, with some basic baking skills. I can make some fancier meals without using the cookbook, but I am certainly not a chef. Story 17. I can follow a recipe and I am very good at grilling things. If I were on one of those shows where they throw a bunch of ingredients at you and tell you to make something in 20 minutes, I would fail miserably. Story 18. Very decent. I can cook almost everything except desserts. I can improvise and follow recipes. Story 19. The more of a mess there is, the higher the chance the quality of my food goes down. I get overwhelmed just looking at everything involved, so I try to simplify everything I make. For example, I enjoyed fried over baked. But baked is so much easier, so I always go with baked. I let a restaurant fry my food so I don't have to clean everything up. Story 20. I am very good at a few particular items and competent enough to get creative. I can follow a recipe without a problem and probably own far more kitchen gadgets than I need. I enjoy making fancy desserts and love baking. My plans for the day include baking sourdough bread and making soft-serve ice cream. My wife is happy to let me do the cooking. Story 21. The bottom end of intermediate. Overall, 4 out of 10. Chopping, 6 out of 10. Tasting and seasoning, 6 out of 10. Meats, 4 out of 10. Fish, 2 out of 10. Vegetables, 4 out of 10. Sauces, 4 out of 10. Cannot bake at all. Story 22. I can cook basic dishes like sloppy joes and scrambled eggs, but I leave the harder recipes to my boyfriend or my best friend. Story 23. I did it for a living for 8 years and learned from some talented chefs. I still cook for fun but am terrible at baking. Story 24. Decent enough that friends ask for seconds, but not good enough that I would ever try charging money for it. Story 25. Cooking became a hobby and passion of mine. I make as much as possible from scratch and love hosting dinner parties. I installed a commercial kitchen in my house during a recent renovation because of how much I enjoy it. I am not professionally trained, but I grew up watching cooking shows and reading cookbooks, and it has become a part of who I am. Story 26. I shouldn't have a kitchen. Cooking is the chore I loathe so much, but as a woman, I felt the pressure to do it. I could have killed my family with some dishes I made. I have burned more food than seems humanly possible. Then I learned about beans. I can somehow make those in a pressure cooker and I love them. I should have been born with a note that said, needs a chef to accompany and cook for her. Story 27. The more complicated the ingredients and cooking, the better. I mess simple meals up big time. I can cook a pretty good Wellington with a good mash side. But I burn boxed macaroni and cheese. My mind tends to overcomplicate the simple. Story 28. I can follow a recipe and have a pretty good sense of what tastes good, but my technique is terrible, so the results are often unimpressive. I am really good at pies, though. I spent about a year perfecting my pie crust recipe. If I did that with other kitchen skills, I would be a very good cook. Story 29. If I am motivated? Pretty good. I would not say I am Master Chef level, but I was trained by one on how to properly season and grill burgers. I can cook casseroles, pastas, pizza from scratch, and so on. I never really got into baking sweets and pastries, though. Maybe I will try it one day. Story 30. Even if I do say so myself, I am quite good. When I was in my teens, my father took a catering course and started bringing back these wonderful exotic meals. At least exotic for Northern England in the late 1970s, which piqued my interest. Then I got into bodybuilding. Bodybuilders tend to follow quite eccentric diets, so I learned to cook for myself. My first wife was Southeast Asian but completely useless and disinterested in the kitchen, so I cooked for us most nights. My current wife is professionally trained as a chef, so I have learned a lot from her. I am quite competitive, so I am always trying to close the gap. Story 31. I love to cook and grew up working in a kitchen with my mom a lot. But anytime I think I am good, I meet someone who just started yesterday and is already making things that would win competition shows. So I do not know. I enjoy it and teaching my son, but decent is about as far as I would go. Story 32. I am decent. I attended cooking school at my local community college and performed well in both the tests and the actual cooking. Story 33. I'm a decent cook, C+, I guess. I would be a better cook if I were not impatient. My fault is that I want to rush everything, and that is never good. Story 34. I would say I am a moderate average amateur cook. I can follow a recipe slowly, but I get it done eventually. The food tastes good, and I am always learning. Story 35. Pretty decent. As long as I have a rough idea of how to make something, such as recipes and prior knowledge from experimenting, and the recipe requires no complicated technique, I will be fine. However, I have to say my vegetable and meat cutting skills are poor. Also, I am very slow when it comes to moving in the kitchen. Story 36. I am a good cook. I grew up not liking what my parents made, so I usually cooked for myself. I learned basic skills on my own. Then I had a girlfriend whose dream was to be a head chef. She worked at some high-end restaurants, so I learned a lot more from her. I am usually really good at imagining what ingredients will go well together. I rarely use a recipe other than for inspiration. I would say 90% of the time my meals turn out great, but every once in a while I completely fail and barely want to eat it. My wife almost always loves everything. I love cooking. Story 37. I am a great cook and have been cooking for years. I was a kitchen manager and head cook at a place for 3 years. It was often short-staffed, and I ran it alone many times. I tripled the number of clients. Then I started doing all the baking. I left that job for one with benefits but came back a month later as the full-time baker, making everything from scratch as we also prepared the food. At this point, I was working 2 full-time jobs. I would come in later on Tuesdays so I could stay later to bake and help prepare everything for the next day, as it was our busiest day. The new director wanted her friend to have my job, so they fired me for coming in late. There was no warning and no write-up, just termination. The new person did not even know how to make Jell-O or cook. This situation put me into massive debt that I am trying to recover from, but most days I am unsure if I will be able to keep the utilities on. I do not have money for groceries or anything else. I loved what I did and was shocked and unprepared to lose that income. It is very difficult. Story 38. Way better than I actually cook these days. I would call myself mid-grade but self-taught. I have made some amazing dishes that I am proud of years later, including a perfect prime rib, chili from scratch with peeled fresh tomatoes, crumpets, and lemon curd. However, I mostly make pasta with hidden vegetables because of the kids. Story 39. I'm okay. I still make mistakes sometimes, like adding too much or not enough salt or overcooking food. But it's good enough for my family. I get nervous cooking for guests, though. Story 40. Passable. I can make a roux and deep fry with confidence, but that is about as far as my abilities go. Story 41. Mid-low, but I do follow a recipe pretty well. Also, I am not capable of making good soft sandwich bread. Story 42. I'm pretty good at what I do. I worked as a cook for 12 years, some of that time as a head cook. I am extremely picky, so I am never going to be a master chef. I do not cook fish or shrimp. However, if you want some good Southern-style American food that is not seafood, I can make it. Story 43. I get by. Last night, I made pepper jack and Parmesan macaroni and cheese. The other day, I made tacos. I basically cook fairly easy bachelor meals. Story 44. I am not good at cooking. I absolutely detest it. I have set my clothes on fire boiling water for coffee, gave myself food poisoning because I thought you could eat chicken rare, ate navy beans after soaking for only 45 minutes instead of overnight, and they expanded in my stomach. I also got second-degree burns from dropping a boiling pot of lasagna noodles on myself. I am even more embarrassed to admit that I am a 64-year-old female and never learned to cook. Fortunately, I was married to a man for 22 years who loved to cook and was very good at it. Unfortunately, that turned out to be his only enduring redeeming quality. Thankfully, food delivery services were becoming popular when we divorced. Now, cooking for me is when I heat up my SpaghettiOs instead of eating them out of the can. Story 45. I can cook, but my food is pretty bland. If I were forced to fend for myself, I would survive but eat many unsatisfying meals. I am envious of people who can instinctively combine ingredients to make something delicious. I have improved over the years, but I accept that I will never be a good cook. It is a good thing I married an excellent cook. Story 46. Maybe like 6 out of 10. I am a pretty decent home cook. I cook dinner every day for my wife and on holidays for my family, and it all turns out well. Admittedly, I am not attempting very challenging dishes, but the food I make is solid. I will say that my knife skills could use improvement, and I am not very experienced with grilling, though I am working on it. Story 47. Barely okay at cooking. I can even burn the water when cooking pasta. Although I consider myself fairly good at cooking fast food, such as burgers with homemade patties and sauce, or curry sausage with fries. Yes, it is possible to absolutely mess up grilling a curry sausage. Other than that, I am bad at cooking. Story 48. I'm okay. I enjoy it, but I prefer quick versions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time or use many ingredients to make a sauce when I can open a jar. However, I do a good job with the meats and vegetables. Story 49. I am a 25-year-old male and I love food. I have been cooking for myself for 7 to 8 years. I have a few excellent recipes and several I still have not tried yet. I cook well and mostly enjoy it. Cooking for others makes me very anxious, but everyone seems to enjoy it. Story 50. I am not patient, so I rush sometimes, but it comes out pretty good. I love to try cooking new things every week. Story 51. I almost burned the apartment down trying to make a grilled cheese sandwich. I should not be allowed in the kitchen without supervision. Story 52. I consider myself a good cook if I have recipes to follow or have cooked a dish many times before. I struggle when it comes to improvising and making different ingredients work or blend together. I hope to learn how to pair certain flavors, textures, and other components that make up dishes. Story 53. I am comfortably able to make a varied catalog of meals that feed a family of 4, including some children who can be picky at times. Some meals are ones that my children have specifically requested. I would say I am a solid home cook who likes to try new things. Story 54. I make the best etouffee in the world. I make some pretty solid gumbo and tasty red beans. My gumbo is also a crowd pleaser. Story 55. I love to cook, and my children think I am awesome. When I was married, I cooked 98% of the time. Now that I am divorced, my ex gets DoorDash almost daily. I have made almost everything except prime rib. I made it for Christmas last year, and it was phenomenal. Story 56. Good enough to survive so far. Generally perfectly capable of following recipes, but not very good at coming up with something myself. Story 57. I think I could be a good cook, but I do not eat meat, so the foods I make are mostly egg, rice, or pasta-based, which is a setback. Having carbohydrate-dense food does not feel like real cooking to me despite how much effort I put in and how good the food tastes and looks. Story 58. Well, anytime cooking is involved, my coworkers ask me, "Brett, are you cooking?" At the Christmas party, it was catered, and we were to bring sides and desserts. I made 3 trays of smoked macaroni and cheese. For 3 months, I heard, "Brett, you saved that lunch." Idokai. My Chinese coworker took some of my char siu pork home, and his wife and kids asked, "Are you sure he's white?" Story 59. Quite good, or so I am told. With a recipe, I can make practically anything. Without a recipe, I can competently make a good variety of dishes from different regions. I would say I cook towards the more savory side because that is my preference. I am American. I would venture that I cook better than most sit-down restaurants, but maybe not as competently as a Michelin star restaurant. Story 60. I like cooking and baking. As an amateur, I am not bad. Compared to a professional, they would not let me prepare the salad. Story 61. I can follow written instructions and have a good eye for quality. I enjoy improvising and using ingredients that are close to their expiration date, but other people think it is unappetizing and will not even taste it. Story 62. Here's eggs, vegetables, and chicken. Make a dish. Other people. Chicken and vegetable frittata with herb aioli, chicken roulade with vegetable stuffing and a soft-boiled egg yolk center, savory chicken and vegetable egg custard tart, and more. Me. Here is fried egg, boiled vegetables, and steamed chicken. Story 63. Pretty good, I think. My girlfriend would rather I cook than go to a fancy restaurant if I am preparing steak or something similar. Story 64. I don't like cooking at all, but I'm decent at it. For many years, I cooked roughly 0 to 3 times per year, basically only when I read or watched something about an exotic dish that intrigued me to try it out. For the last 2 years, I aim to cook once per week, and as much as I try, I have no fun doing it. It always feels like a waste of time because I could order a perfectly fine dinner with much less hassle. However, a wife or visiting friends being happy because I cooked for them makes up for that hassle at least a little bit. Story 65. 8 out of 10 home cook. I have been watching cooking videos and shows since the 1900s and have collected many tips. Story 66. Better than average, nowhere near as good as someone professionally trained. As a bored child, I watched many cooking shows for fun. I learned a lot from watching. Story 67. I put a lamb roast into the slow cooker last night at 4 a.m., so it would finish the first part of the cooking by 2 p.m. That gave me time to reduce the stock and juices to a rich gravy. I parboiled some potatoes to put into the oven for the final roasting, and I also made honey-glazed carrots to go with it. I served the roast shredded with hummus, pickled vegetables, and pan-cooked pita bread. Story 68. I'm good within a limited scope. I cook all of my meals in a single dish if I have the choice. I hate washing dishes. That said, I know how to cook in the sense that I can turn ingredients into a meal. If I don't have butter, I know what else I can use instead. I can gauge how long to cook meat by looking at it, caramelize vegetables, and make simple sauces and dressings on the fly. If you need an edible meal with minimal cleanup, I'm your guy. But I can't bake well. Story 69. Pretty decent. I have no problem making good food, but I absolutely hate spending hours on a dish, so that somewhat limits the range of what I make. At least my wife likes it, and often I am called over for seasoning when she is unsure what is missing. Story 70. A pretty decent one. I make above restaurant quality ramen according to people. I find joy in cooking as a hobby. Having said that, there is still so much I want to learn. Story 71. I never learned to cook, but I am a really good cook. I enjoy cooking first courses such as Ukrainian borscht, Caucasian carcho soup, and cheese soup. Most of all, I like to cook meat dishes like steaks, meatballs, and oven-baked dishes. The most delicious dishes are made when I use my secret ingredient, like Kung Fu Panda, 2 cans of light beer. When I drink them while cooking, the food turns out great. Story 72. A meal I eat regularly about 5 times a week is literally just 2 mashed medium potatoes, a quarter cup of cheddar cheese on top, a cup of spinach on top of that, a cup of plant-based meat crumbles on top, and 3 eggs cooked into a lid shape on top. It is seasoned only with a drizzle of ketchup and sriracha mayonnaise. So yeah, Michelin quality, I would guess. Story 73. I am very good, but I have been learning since I was 3 years old. I am 38 now and have never stopped absorbing all I can on how to cook and how to combine flavors. My loved ones are always very grateful when I cook. Feels good. Cooking is good therapy. Story 74. I think I'm all right, pretty good depending on the genre. I can really cook a steak to the point that I can't justify ordering one out, along with all the sides that go with it. The same goes for burgers and anything American that is grilled or pan-fried. I'm pretty good with those. I can do basic Mexican and Tex-Mex dishes like rice, beans, fajitas, asado, though not as well as a real Tex-Mex or Mexican restaurant. I'm also good at Italian pastas and risotto, though I will still choose restaurant risotto more often than restaurant pasta. I can make great pizza and sauce, though I consider that more of a bread baking technique. Given a recipe, I am fairly confident I can make anything. I am good at following directions. Story 75. I can follow any recipe. 2 years of cooking classes in high school, followed by many years of cooking. I also care a lot about texture, cooking temperature, and time. Am I good? Probably. Many people have complimented my cooking, and I have been cooking for 25 years. Story 76. I ended up doing the majority of the cooking in my marriage because I was the better cook. I didn't do much cooking growing up, maybe just making boxed macaroni and cheese. As a young adult, I started making cakes and cookies from scratch and giving them to my female neighbors. Then I advanced to breakfast foods. After I got married and left the United States Navy, I began making skillet dishes. From there, it was pretty easy to start making more dishes from scratch. I am picky about my cooking and believe you should keep improving until the food is delicious. Story 77. I like to think I am a pretty good cook when I can control my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Getting distracted and overcooking food is rare but not unheard of. On a more serious note, I do not buy pre-made box products like Hamburger Helper. I cook from scratch and rarely use a recipe. I can cook a steak to perfection using several different methods. Story 78. The love of my life used to say I made the best eggs ever. I left him to return to my alcoholic, unfaithful ex-husband for the sake of our child. It did not work, and he never appreciated my eggs anywhere near as much as my love did. I miss him. He praised me constantly. I was a fool. Story 79. Enough to impress friends and family. It got worse recently after an accident that cut off part of my finger with a knife. Knife skills and other manual dexterity skills declined, so I don't cook as well. Story 80. I was a professional chef for 35 years. I worked in restaurants, hotels, institutional kitchens, and as a private chef for multiple clients. I also served in the military for 20 years working as a cook. I left the military 13 years ago and now work in information technology. I am happy to have a new career that I enjoy. While I do not cook every day anymore, when I do, it is at home for myself and my wife. I can cook just about anything, but my favorite things to cook are breakfasts, soups, and baked goods. Story 81. Well, my girlfriend and her 2 teenage daughters will eat anything I cook without questioning it because they know that I know how to make anything taste good. For the first few years, they always wanted to go out to eat at a nice restaurant for their birthday meals. But now they just request a dish and ask me to cook it for them. The best compliment you can get from a teenage girl is when they say your food is delicious. Story 82. It depends on who you are comparing against. Not as good as Marco Pierre White, but better than a friend who used an entire bottle of soy sauce in a stir-fry because it kept disappearing. Story 83. Good enough to impress people, especially with pastry. I am not artistic, but I compensate with taste. Story 84. Up until an hour ago, I would say very decent. However, I just made a potato curry, which I made before but did not write down what I did, and I think I messed it up. My confidence in cooking took a hit. Story 85. I once made a salmon and spinach lasagna a few years ago that was so good I often think about it. However, I will not make it again because, first, I am vegan now, and second, it might ruin the memory of how incredible it was. Story 86. I married the world's greatest cook. She taught me all her tips and tricks. After the divorce, I used those tricks to cook for any woman I dated. I guess many women have never met a man who truly knows his way around a kitchen because they seemed very impressed. Now I'm older and always up for new culinary challenges. I cook for the entire family for birthdays, parties, Christmas, and more. I cooked for Thanksgiving with all the trimmings at a wilderness camp with no electricity. Just a wood stove, some barbecues, and a few one-burner propane camping stoves. 18 people showed up. I cooked 7 vegetables, a turkey, a ham, and a roast pork. Everything was served hot and received rave reviews. Everyone left full and took home leftovers. It was my finest hour. Story 87. If it is a recipe I already know, I would say it is decent. If it is one I do not know but have detected instructions, the first attempts will be alright and improve from there. Anything else is probably not the greatest. Story 88. I kind of just guess how much of each ingredient to add to a dish, and about 80% end up somewhere between okay and great. Usually, the bad meals just needed to be cooked slower or have more salt. I frequently underestimate how much salt and butter a meal needs to taste like a restaurant-quality meal. Story 89. If I have a proper recipe, I am pretty decent. In Denmark, it is very expensive to eat out or get takeout, so most people here are good cooks out of necessity. Story 90. I went to culinary school but quickly realized I loved cooking so much I did not want it to be work. I would say I am above average. It has been about 13 years since my culinary schooling, and I have not been honing my skills much since then. Story 91. I am self-taught and pretty good. A good friend of mine, who is third-generation Italian, told me my lasagna is better than his mother's. Story 92. I am pretty good. My children love my cooking, as does my wife, so I must be pretty good. I recently started grilling and have done a very good job there too. Story 93. Cooking for me is like showing people I love them in a nonverbal way. I know how every one of my friends likes their steak and what to add to their plates, etc. It is therapeutic to me. Story 94. I love to cook and bake. No one has ever said anything negative about my abilities. I have found that most people I know Given the chance to dine at my house or a restaurant, almost always choose my house. Story 95. I'm a terrible cook. If I try to plan a meal, I end up eating things separately because I cannot time it all to be done together. If I focus on one thing, I can get by. On the other hand, I love baking. Story 96. I was okay, probably better than average. My wife's cooking is better. But I stopped cooking because if she cooks, I do the dishes. If I cook, I do the dishes. Story 97. I have been cooking simple meals for my roommate and me. He does not have a sense of smell, so as long as the food is not too salty or sweet, he likes it. I must be a bad cook. Story 98. Self-reliance is important, and I am also old, so I have learned to make pretty much anything that is not found in a fine dining restaurant, and a few that are. Learn to make a demi-glace, you will enjoy it. I suppose my cooking nemesis is phyllo pastry. It never turns out well. Story 99. Let's put it this way. I do not throw away bacon grease. I wipe it with bread and then stick it in the oven to toast. Story 100. I lack the patience, temperament, time, and interest to do anything more than follow simple recipes. As for improvising, no. I like my food edible and non-poisonous. Story 101. Very often, I have to make everything from scratch. Not because I enjoy it, but because I am expected to. Story 102. Fairly decent. I can do basic cooking and improvise, but definitely not anything that would count as gourmet. Story 103. I am a very talented cook, and it is one of my dearest hobbies. I receive many compliments for it. Story 104. I feel good when I am well enough. I enjoy full roasts, ramen, desserts, and many other foods. However, I rarely feel well enough to cook. The longest time I cooked was for 2 weeks, preparing homemade meals for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This was because I had to stay home and ensure my ex was okay after her operation. Figuring out what she could stomach and what she might want was actually enjoyable. The difficult part is that work drains all my energy and does not motivate me to function normally, let alone cook as well as I know I can. Story 105. According to my best friend, I am a good cook. However, I am not intentionally a good cook. I just make the right mistakes so that it works. Story 106. Good enough or just average? It is not that hard a skill. The internet is filled with recipes to follow, but I have grown to resent cooking, so that probably brings the quality down a little. Story 107. My fiancée is picky, but she always loves my cooking. I managed to get her to like asparagus, even though she is not a fan of most vegetables. Story 108. Baking cakes and pies, roasting meat and vegetables, making gravy and sauces, and crock-pot cooking. Sure. I am not good at smoking meat or grilling on an open flame for a crowd, though. I cannot make homemade sourdough bread or pretzels that look good and taste good at the same time. Story 109. I am a good cook. I try to cook with as little oil as possible and make it tasty as well. I excel with appetizers, mostly Balkan. Story 110. My daughter says eating at restaurants is disappointing most of the time because my food makes it lacking by comparison. I used to cook professionally. Now I work in an office. Story 111. I am really good when I am excited to make the meal, but if I am bored with it or not interested in eating it, I am not that great. Story 112. Not the best, but I have been trying to learn more. I know how to make shepherd's pie, a good bowl of spaghetti, ramen, and I have recently learned how to make stir-fry. Story 113. Solid cook. 7.5 out of 10 in my opinion. Not all my dishes are phenomenal, but they are almost always better than eating out. Favorites are shrimp and mushroom risotto, beef burgundy, and homemade fries with sous vide or reverse seared ribeye, basted with rosemary and butter into a red wine pan sauce. Story 114. I'm pretty good. It's a skill I picked up from wooing past girlfriends, several of whom really liked it when a guy cooked for them. My specialty is lasagna, mushroom stroganoff, nasi goreng, a kind of Indonesian paella, and most delicious of all, creamy herbal braised beef. I haven't dated for years, and I miss the moments when a companion and I would be chatting in the kitchen, sipping wine, with her looking on approvingly while I chopped and stirred ingredients and made it all look effortless. Story 115. Honestly, my fiancé and I really focused on cooking last year, and we have reached the point where we enjoy our meals more than most restaurants. It has kind of ruined eating out for us because we realize many restaurants serve not very good food. Cooking gives us something fun to do together, and we do not have to overpay for mediocre food and then tip for mediocre service. Story 116. Went to culinary school and worked more than 10 years in restaurants, including 2 high-end steakhouses. I have some skills. Story 117. I make a few things very well and can prepare a meal quickly with what I have on hand. I do not know how to cook many dishes, but I know enough to provide us with variety. A little better than average, I suppose. Story 118. Very good. Simple to me, following a set of instructions. One tip: prepare everything first. I cut everything, then clean the mess from my prep, then cook. I'm confident that if Gordon Ramsay showed up at my door, I could impress him with something. Or Uncle Roger, since I make a really mean egg fried rice. I literally can't order egg fried rice at restaurants anymore because mine is so much better, so the restaurants are always a letdown. Story 119. I'm really good at toaster oven tater tots and reheated pizza. I once ruined a George Foreman grill during the first use while trying to cook chicken. The chicken was stuck to it so badly that I couldn't get it off, so I threw it all out. I managed to burn the outside of the chicken so badly it smoked up my whole house, but it was still raw inside. Good times. Story 120. My limited menu, all made from scratch: steak, stir-fried vegetables, cheese sauce, carrot cake, over 25 years of experience. Story 121. Very good, I would say. I went to culinary school one night a week while I was at music college. Cooking was always my hobby. I cooked as a side job for a while, but it took a lot of the fun out of it. Now I do not really make special things, but whatever I make is usually on point. The only times I put in real effort for something fancy are for holiday dinners, birthdays, and special occasions. Otherwise, I am mostly concerned with making quick, easy, healthy food that tastes good and does not leave too many dishes. Story 122. Decent, I guess. I can follow recipes and make a successful meal or snack. My boyfriend thinks I am a good cook, but he gives me too much credit. Story 123. Not great, pretty much just eggs and macaroni and cheese. I am taking cooking classes later this year since they will help me eat healthier. Being an attractive trait helps keep me motivated to continue. Story 124. Pretty good as long as I have either made it before or have my wife nearby for guidance. I can make a mean chicken or beef curry meal. Story 125. I am really good with eggs, and I can grill a decent steak. Aside from that, I have enough of a technical brain that I am generally pretty good at following a recipe. I am not an inspired cook, but I can do it when needed. Story 126. I'm a pretty good cook when I set my mind to it. I usually create dishes and spice combinations, and they surprisingly turn out well. It is usually when I follow a recipe that the dish is not as good. I find that many recipes are a little off, and when I follow them word for word, the result is not as good. Story 127. I am an excellent home cook, but I do not think I could handle a line, and I am definitely not pastry chef material. Story 128. I'm a very skilled cook, but would never consider myself equal to a professional chef. I spent a few months working in a kitchen and started to dislike my hobby, even though I was learning a lot. Story 129. If I have a clear recipe, I am pretty good. Just give me directions and I will make it happen. However, I am not creative or clever when it comes to cooking. I need a plan. Story 130. It is one of the few skills I am truly proud of. I have been cooking since the pandemic began, and now I prepare my 3 meals almost every day. Story 131. I'm great on a stovetop, griddle, barbecue, or smoker, but I can't bake well. My favorite way to cook is without any recipe, relying on my mood, taste, and smell. I have a variety of dried herbs and spices that I use throughout the year. Story 132. I am a much better line cook than home cook. When I am not working, I eat ramen, pasta, and microwave snacks. Story 133. I would never cook something for anyone but myself. I am used to eating all the foods I manage to mess up, which is about 90% of the 10 dishes I know how to cook. Story 134. I am decent, I guess, like average. I can follow a recipe, adjust the taste a little to my liking, and improvise a bit. But that is about it. Story 135. Culinary Institute of America classes and some Cordon Bleu classes helped me improve my cooking skills and understand everything that is happening. They eased my frustration and improved my time in the kitchen. I became less stressed and more productive. The best result is that I am eating much better than before. Occasionally, I go all out and create a meal, usually 3 or 4 courses, plated like it is from a magazine. It really helped when I bought charger plates, new bone china, and a crystal champagne ice bucket. You really need to spoil yourself from time to time. Also, I do not eat out often because I can make meals at home. Story 136. I'm pretty good, but I need to work on plating and presentation. I do dinner parties for my friends, and I always struggle to get the plating the way I want it. It's always off. I also need to work on some basics. I have decent knife skills, but I want to improve to fine dining standards. It takes me too long to get a consistent and fine julienne. Story 137. I'm 30. I finally got tired of cooking the same basic unhealthy meals all the time and started looking up recipes for things I was in the mood for, trying to cook from scratch. It was difficult at first because everything took 3 times as long to make, but after a year or two, I am finally reaching the point where I am faster and, more importantly, can improvise to put something together or experiment with what I already know. I am definitely not an expert cook compared to others. Half of my dishes still turn out subpar. Story 138. Before I had a stroke that paralyzed my left side and left me permanently disabled, I was a pretty great cook and baker. I rarely ate out because I could make food myself. Story 139. I no longer set things on fire and can cook without burning food. Overcooking or undercooking is now only occasionally an issue. Easy food is my specialty. If you want something beyond that, feel free to offer to cook or suggest ordering food. Story 140. I can make nutritious, simple meals that taste better than the food in most restaurants I can afford or want to afford. Story 141. I'm decent. I can cook some great things, but none of it is quick. A good cook is not necessarily making otherworldly cuisine. It is more that they remain consistent while doing it quickly. I take 2 hours to make salsa. I do not know how I do it, partly because I do dishes and clean while I work. Story 142. I'm pretty good. I worked in a fine dining restaurant for about 10 years, and I also like to study the culinary field as a hobby. I read and watch videos with famous, decorated chefs all the time to see how they operate. Story 143. I'm a very good cook. I make my own tomato sauce and I like to bake. I have created several bread recipes. I learned to cook Indian food for my friends in college and did all the cooking during the short time I was married. I also paid all the bills and did all the housework. It's funny, most of my male friends can cook, but none of the women I know do. Story 144. I can make cream sauce from scratch, and I can cook chicken without overcooking or drying it out, but things like deep frying or baking are beyond my capabilities at the moment. Story 145. My wife would rather I cook meats than go to a steakhouse, after having been to many. So I am decent. Story 146. I'm a hobby chef and I love cooking for others so much that I didn't want to ruin my passion by doing it professionally. Story 147. I consider myself a decent cook. I have never had anyone refuse to eat my food, except for myself when experimenting due to a lack of ingredients. Story 148. I rate myself as good. Not incredible, but generally above average. The best way I can describe it is that I have cooked enough and am aware of how to use most ingredients. If you present me with a set of ingredients with no recipe or instructions, I could make a meal out of it with the following results. 60% chance it will be good and tasty, as in I would pay for it at a restaurant. 15% chance it will be downright amazing, better than what most restaurants offer. 20% chance it would be pretty good, but probably not something I would pay for at a restaurant. 5% chance I make a mistake. I might still eat a portion of it, but will not touch the leftovers. This happened most recently when I was making salted cod stew, got distracted, and burned the bottom. Story 149. Cooking is extremely stressful and I hate it, but I do the best I can to provide good meals for my wife and children. If it is just me, I never do anything more complicated than a can of soup or a sandwich, and I often just eat cereal. Story 150. Have you ever seen those, "Hey chef, can you make this gourmet?" moments when they pass off a $20 bill? I have $80 and an empty fridge until next Wednesday. Story 151. I love cooking. I was not taught how as a child, so I am self-taught. However, I am very good, and I am frequently complimented on my cooking and asked for recipes. Story 152. I can follow a recipe well enough. I am not very fast at chopping, so I usually try to chop and prepare everything before I start cooking to avoid falling behind or burning food. I am not good at improvising. I have to search for replacement ingredients if I do not have something. Story 153. I hosted a 6-person dinner for my friends in college. After a few times, it grew to 20 people. We then regularly hosted squad dinners once a month, and they would post polls to determine what food I would cook next. Between 20 and 30 people attended every month for 2 years. Story 154. As a linguistic minority where I lived, I took refuge in kitchens through my 20s, and now I am a very competent chef. It is not my passion, but if you live with me, you will be well fed every night. I do not love restaurant culture. It is too brutal. I prefer to move on and just cook for myself, friends, and family. Story 155. Quite accomplished. I have a spreadsheet of the last 175 meals I cooked, representing over 20 world cuisines. Story 156. I am a 34-year-old male who loves to cook. My grandmother and mother taught me. I considered doing it as a job, but I know if I became financially dependent on it, I would grow to hate it. I cook and experiment for fun on weekends, and my friends are always happy to volunteer to be fed and try things. No one has become ill yet, so I am a competent cook. They also come back, so I must be good enough. My grandmother still adjusts things if I cook with her, so there is room for improvement. I will happily travel to taste food and learn how it is made. My last trip was to Florence and Rome. I also enjoy the challenge of trying to create the tastiest meals out of the cheapest and healthiest ingredients I can find. Story 157. I can make most things by eye, taste, smell, and touch without recipes. I don't bake, though. I worked in high-end restaurants when I was younger, but in the front of house. I paid attention while I was in the kitchen, and one of my best friends is a successful chef, so I can always pick his brain. Most of the dishes I make are rich, so if I only ate what I made, I would be the size of a house. Thankfully, my wife enjoys cooking and preparing healthy meals. Story 158. My mom is the best cook I have ever known. She was born and raised in southern France. So much of our cooking is very French-inspired. She is a flight attendant and is gone 3 to 4 days a week. During those days, I started practicing cooking a couple of years ago. I am now quite a good chef, skilled in many types of cooking. I also enjoy watching Yen Can Cook, a great old show. Although I do not think I could compete with a professional restaurant chef, I am confident in my skills. I learned to cook because my father is in poor physical health, so my girlfriend and I take care of him, and my girlfriend does not enjoy cooking. As a family, we have very nice meals every night. Time spent in the kitchen ranges from half an hour to 2 or 3 hours daily. Dishes include beef burgundy, chicken Florentine, and I even use the deep fryer for chicken fried steaks, hot wings, and more. My unique approach is that I use only one knife, a Chinese chef knife resembling a cleaver, for everything. I do not use a paring knife, fillet knife, or any others, just like Martin Yen. Story 159. I am an excellent cook. It is something I have always been passionate about. I actually just got a job today as an assistant manager at a local restaurant about an hour ago. Story 160. I am a pretty good cook, but I am not a gourmet chef. However, I can make good food that is tasty and relatively healthy. Story 161. I have decent skills. I always say I am a mechanic. I know how to interpret a recipe and have a good idea of what it will taste like. Story 162. I worked as a chef and cook for 12 years before switching careers, and I still only consider myself 6 out of 10. When you realize how deep the pool of knowledge is, it is quite humbling. Story 163. I cook quite nice national food, such as dumplings, bigos, rossel, and so on from Poland. I am also biased because I can't really find good restaurants that cook good enough food for me to order when it comes to Polish cuisine. I have also started to bake really good cakes, although I often have issues with creams not reaching the right consistency. However, I have mastered cheesecake, brownies, and fruitcake by now. I just made a nice Raffaello cake a few days ago. My husband is a happy man. Story 164. Pretty good, actually. Gotten to the point I no longer need a recipe for many dishes and also understand how ingredients work together. Girlfriend, friends, and family love my food, which makes me happy. Story 165. I am a stay-at-home husband, and I can cook every vegetarian dish my wife likes, along with some favorites of my own. Story 166. I make a mean stir-fry. My risotto is excellent. My wife raves about my soups. My work uniform says sous chef on it. Point being, I am okay. I rate myself 6.5 out of 10. Story 167. Put this way, I like watching some cooking competition shows. I would not be good enough for MasterChef, but I feel like I could win Dinner Budget Showdown. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.